Alrighty, so I'm back with another Magic the Gathering budget deck tech. This one's Depala Pilot Exemplar, and it's for my friend Mortimer. This is designed for him. He's actually already purchased it. I gave him the list earlier. I made this one a while back. I've just been really lazy about making another video, but so this is a dwarf and vehicle tribal, as you can tell from the commander. And she is a bit of a card draw engine on her own, because when you tap her, you could pay X, and if you do, reveal the top X cards, and then put all the dwarves and all the vehicles, so dwarves and vehicles, not all artifacts, just dwarves and vehicles, into your hand. And then the rest go on the bottom in a random order. So we've got our mana base here, and all this info comes from Moxfield itself. The total mana value is 215. Average mana value of cards is 217 or 2.17 including lands, or 3.36 not including lands. There's 35 land cards in this deck. There aren't any MDFC land cards in here. 18 of the 36 lands produce white mana, 17 of the 36 produce red, and then the average number of lands in a starting hand is 2.47. So 2.5, but you can't really draw two or half a land unless you count an MDFC, and there's none in here. So these are our non-basic lands, which are Boros Guild Gate, Citadel Gate, and Cliff Gate. Pretty similar to my last one. It's full of gates, because gates you can tutor for, sort of. You've got the Navigation Orb, which allows you to search for 2 gates, which is really good. Then we've got Command Tower and Dwarven Mind. From there we have our utility lands, and there's only really 2, which are Myriad Landscape and Rogue's Passage. Myriad Landscape is good for getting more lands, and Rogue's Passage is excellent because you can make something unblockable. And there are some pretty potent effects to Voltron up a single creature and send it through. Probably most likely going to be your commander for that commander damage, but there's a few effects in here. It's not the main focus, but it is a alternate win con, I guess you could say. Here's our non-land, which is going to be our mana rocks. Boros Locket. We can also sacrifice it for cards, but there's plenty of card draw in here. Lantern of Revealing, of course, which can get us more lands or just tap for mana. And Cultivator's Caravan, which is essentially a mana rock. Just remember, if you crew it when it first comes in, you won't be able to tap it for mana unless you somehow give it haste. So, like, the turn you cast it, it's basically a mana rock only. We've got Magda Brazen Outlaw. She is excellent because whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, you'll create a treasure. Colossal Plow gives you life and 3 white mana, and then you don't lose that until the end of your turn. And Horde Hauler creates you a bunch of treasures. Magda's also very useful. We'll come back to her later. But for the combo, there is a combo and a non-combo version. But in the combo version of the deck, Magda can tutor out each piece of the combo on her own. So if you have, say, 15 treasures and you haven't drawn a single piece of the combo, you can just dump all 15 of them to get those cards and put them onto the battlefield. We've got Navigation Orb, like I mentioned earlier, which can tutor for 2 basic lands or 2 gates. And then Wayfarer's Bauble, which does 1 basic land. We also have Thematic Compass, and this time I did remember to show the backside. So the front side Thematic Compass, you tap it to reveal basic lands, or to search for a basic land and put them into your hand. Then if you control 7 or more at the beginning of your end step, you transform it, and it transforms into Spires of Orazca. I believe that's how that's pronounced. You tap it for a colorless, or you can tap it to remove a big Voltron-y creature from combat. And then there's also these 2, which I forgot and added in at the very end. Stoic Farmer, when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic plains and reveal it. If an opponent controls more lands than you, put it on the battlefield, otherwise it goes into your hand. You can also foretell it, which is kind of helpful early on if you don't have nearly enough. If you get stuck with only 2 mana, which would be very unfortunate, then you can still cast this. All you need is at least 2, and you can still get it out. And then Aerial Surveyor, whenever it attacks, defending player controls more lands than you get to search for plains and put it on the battlefield tapped. And lastly is Raider's Carve. Whenever it attacks, you can look at the top card of your library, and if it's a land card, put it on the battlefield. So here we get into card draw. We have Priest of Ancient Lore. When it enters the battlefield, you gain a life and draw a card. Really nice. It's just 1 card, but it still does something other than just a spell to draw 1 card, and it gives you a pilot basically for your vehicles. And then we have SRAM, Senior Edificer, who is an excellent card draw engine, especially since we're going to be casting a lot of vehicle spells. There's a few auras and a few equipments, but mostly we're going to be getting his ability from vehicles. We've got some sorceries. There are 4 of them. So we've got Secret Rendezvous, Explosion of Riches, Cut a Deal, and then on the next one we have Pirate's Pillage, which also creates us treasures, which is really great for Magda if we can create a bunch of treasures before getting her out. And then Instance, we have Heartwarming Redemption. Your temple is under attack, which your temple is under attack also doubles as indestructibility for your creatures, so it's board wipe survival. So I'd recommend saving it until absolutely necessary. Lorehold Command does the same thing, except it also could create some a creature token. You can give your creatures indestructible. You can deal 3 damage to any target, or you can sacrifice a permanent and draw some cards. Drawing cards in red and white is always extremely helpful because they're not the best at it. And we have Big Score, which is the same thing as one that we saw earlier, and I already forgot its name. But discard a card, draw 2 cards, create 2 treasures. And creating those treasures is great. We have some vehicles that do the same thing. So Beaumont Bazaar Barge enters the battlefield, draw a card. That's just a quick one and done. Reckoner Bankbuster is reusable up to, it looks like, it enters with 3 charge counters. If you get some sort of proliferate effect, you can use it more. And then Smuggler's Buggy, which isn't quite card draw, but it's hideaway. And it can be very effective, especially since you get to return it to your hand and recast it. So Hideaway is a very good feature. It'll let you get through your deck a lot faster. And then the only thing is you'd have to wait. It's not really as easy to cast things at the right time, so you would probably want to have more permanents under there than instants and sorceries. We have Smuggler's Copter. When it attacks or blocks, you may draw a card and then discard one. Mighty Servant of Luke O, which is going to be really nice whenever it becomes crewed. If it was crewed by 2 creatures, you can draw 2 cards whenever it deals combat damage to a player. And then the Weatherlight is also excellent when it deals combat damage to a player. Look at the top 5. Reveal a historic card from among them, which is mostly going to be artifacts or legendaries in this case. And then we have Magda again. So Magda's great because she basically says draw the card. You can draw exactly what card you need, no matter what, as long as you have the 5 treasures necessary, and you can do it multiple times. You probably want to wait to cast her until you're about to tap a bunch of dwarves, or if you have a way to protect her, because she is very valuable in this deck. The treasures alone are really great for ramp, but being able to pull specific cards to answer different problems is excellent. Next, we've got Fabricate. So not all of these are actually Fabricate effects. There's only 2 actual Fabricates, but I kind of called all of this. Basically, it's either things that'll buff things or things that'll create tokens and have maybe a little bit of an extra effect. So we've got Glint Sleeve and Visionary Augmenter, who will both have Fabricate 1 and 2 respectively. I would recommend going for creating the tokens because that's more blockers and it effectively does the same thing. They're just as susceptible to most board wipes if they don't have the extra 1/1 counters on them. And instead of one thing dying to one attack, say somebody just lightning bolts it, sure, it's going to die regardless, but if you have 3 creatures instead of just 1, the other 2 will survive. And then SRAM's Expertise, create 3 1/1 servo artifact creature tokens, which is the same thing Fabricate's doing, it's just without putting the counters on, or without having that option. And then you can cast a card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost, which is really good. So you're basically paying 4 to cast 7 mana worth of cards. We've got Digsite Engineer, who is also not necessarily Fabricate, but they have a very powerful effect, creating, whenever you cast an artifact, you can pay 2 of any color. If you do, create a 0/0 colorless construct, and it has +1/+1 for each artifact you control. Even if it's the only artifact, which it's not going to be because it triggers when you cast one. But even if it's the only artifact you control, it's going to be a 1/1. With that other artifact in play, you're getting a 2/2, and so on. And each one counts for each other. So these things, if they don't stop Digsite Engineer, it's going to get big quick. We also have Master Trinketer, who can just generate servo tokens, and servos and thopters get +1/+1. War Chanter Scald he doesn't really create servos or anything. It's mostly just because he creates tokens. I just liked the name Fabricate. And then we have Reckless Crew, which also creates tokens, a lot of them. X is the number of vehicles you control, which is a lot, plus the number of equipment you control, which can be a lot in this deck. Rebuild from Ruin. So these are things that either return things from your graveyard to your hand, or return themselves, or allow you to cast things from your graveyard. Metalwork Colossus is really good because there comes a point where you effectively are casting it for free. Especially since your vehicles aren't creatures as long as they're not crewed. And sacrificing 2 artifacts will be very easy to return it from your graveyard to your hand. So paying 0 for a 10/10 is actually pretty good, especially early on if you can get it. But Master Scald, you exile a creature card from your graveyard, and if you do, return target artifact or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. That's very good. Restoration Specialist, you gotta sacrifice to do its effect. Uh, Frantic Salvage is also excellent. Put any number of target artifact cards from your graveyard on top of your library. I'm fairly certain you get to pick the order they go in as well. It doesn't have to be a random order, so you can put the one that you want the most on the very top and then draw it with its extra draw card. Indestructibility and Autopilot. So these are things that are going to make your vehicles either crew themselves, make them indestructible, or in some cases it's just a slight buff. I think most of these are just to give it indestructible and autopilot, so it'll actually crew itself. But Aether Shield Artificer, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target artifact creature gets +2/+2 and gains indestructible until end of turn. Technically, you have to have the vehicle crewed before combat starts for this to actually take effect, because it's got to be a creature when combat begins. But that's not a big deal, and I'm sure in most situations, if you forget, most of my friend group, they're cool with it. They're like, hey, yeah, we get it. You just forgot. It's not a big deal in most cases. We've got Start Your Engines. Vehicles you control become artifact creatures until end of turn, and then creatures you control get +2/+0. That could be a game-winning piece for sure. Same with Armed and Armored, especially the better part about that is you can block with them in that case, because you can just turn them all into creatures and block. And then you can attach any number of equipments to one dwarf you control. Make a Stand. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible. Fleetwheel Cruiser crews itself when it enters the battlefield, basically. So that's one creature. Peace Walker Colossus, you could pay to crew other vehicles as well. And then we have Aerial Modification and Angel Song. Aerial Modification, if you put it on a vehicle, the vehicle becomes a creature and it is automatically crewed. And then Angel Song is basically giving you indestructible until end of turn. It only works for combat damage, but that's effectively what's happening there. And here's some extra effects. So the only human in the deck, everything else is a dwarf, or in case of the combo, there is a dragon in the combo version. And then there's also the constructs. There's a few of those. But Aeronaut Admiral, he gives all your vehicles flying, which is really powerful. That's a very powerful effect. Axeguard Cavalry, you could tap it to give a creature haste. So if you bring out that Metalwork Colossus and you want to swing it immediately, just tap this little 2/2 and you're good to go. Gear Shift Ace gives your vehicles first strike while they're crewed, if it crews it. Plundering Barbarian, that's more for removal. You get to destroy an artifact, or if you have Magda out and you want to use her, you can create the treasure token if that's like the last one you need. Renegade Wheelsmith makes something unblockable, which is really good for your vehicles because you tap him to crew a vehicle anyways. Veteran Motorist gives you a little bit of scry, and he gives +1/+1 to a vehicle when he crews it. Cleansing Wildfire is a land removal spell. So say you're playing against gates and somebody's got Maze's End out. Boom. Perfect way to prevent them from doing anything, really. You're definitely going to want to remember to cast it only when their Maze's End is tapped, though. And you also get to draw a card at the end. Crash Through gives your creatures trample as well. That, in conjunction with one of your autopilot effects, is probably enough to win the game. And you also get to draw a card. Bearded Axe, equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each dwarf, equipment, and or vehicle you control. This deck is chock full of dwarves, vehicles, and not as much equipment, but there's some. So this, putting on your commander and using Rogue's Passage, you could probably one-shot a person late game with just commander damage alone. We've got some extra vehicles, Demolition Stomper and Mobile Garrison. Demolition Stomper can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, so that's kind of nice. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but if you're playing against a token deck with creatures that are just 1/1s or 2/2s, you're great. That's actually pretty solid. Mobile Garrison allows you to untap another target artifact or creature when it attacks, which is kind of cool, but it's an extra effect. It's not the main deal. It's not the meat and potatoes. Rocket Launcher is in there. It's not the greatest card at all. It can be used for the combo, but for the actual combo version, I've replaced it with something else, something much better. So basically, you can cast it. It acts like a creature where you can't use it, even though it has no tap symbol. You have to wait a full turn while it's under your control to use it. But you can basically pay 2 mana to do 1 damage to any target, and you can do this multiple times. After the turn you use it, it is destroyed at the end of the turn. So this is why it's not as good for the combo, but it's less conspicuous because if you use it for the combo, it's a little less conspicuous because it destroys itself and people are like, oh, you just got a removal piece, cool, not a big deal. But we've also got Surge Hacker. When it enters, it deals damage equal to twice the number of vehicles you control to target creature or planeswalker. That's some excellent removal, especially in this. Untethered Express. Whenever it attacks, you get a 1/1 counter on it. Born to Drive. As long as it's a creature, it gets +1/+1 for each creature and or vehicle you control. This is very powerful because you can, once again, throw it on your commander and just stomp somebody out really quickly. Intercessor's Arrest is the last one, and that's effectively a type of removal. Enchanted Permanent can't block or crew vehicles. It also can't attack, and its activated abilities can't be activated unless they're mana. So that's the end of the extra effects. I don't think I put all of the cards in here for the full list, just the most important. I might have hit everything, but I'm not 100% certain. Trying to make this one a little faster because the other ones have taken a long time to make, and I'm trying to keep this one under 20 minutes, which right now we're at. Okay, my fucking microphone cut off again. So right now we're at about 17 minutes. Here's our combo, which is this is what we're replacing in it. So this isn't the actual combo itself, but we're replacing Wayfarer's Bauble, Boros Locket, and you don't have to replace Rocket Launcher. I choose to. Regardless, the effect is the same. But you put in Cogwork Assembler, Power Stone Shard, and Ball's Invoker. Ball's Invoker does the exact same thing as the Rocket Launcher, except it costs 8. It deals 4 damage to each opponent, but you can use it immediately because it does not have that tap symbol, and it does not have that extra line of text saying that you have to wait a full turn to use it. He's also a dragon, as you can see, so you can tutor him out using Magda. So basically, our infinite mana combo is first we want Power Stone Shard on the battlefield. Power Stone Shard and Cogworker Assembler have to be on the battlefield together, basically. So you put them on the battlefield. Do not tap the Power Stone Shard yet, but you need 14 mana. You have to have these two on the board and 14 mana, and then you have infinite mana. Because you can create the token that is a copy of Power Stone Shard, and you do this twice before you tap a Power Stone Shard. Because Power Stone Shard taps for 1 colorless for each artifact you control named Power Stone Shard. So when you create 3 of them, each one taps for 3 mana, which in total is 9 mana, allowing you to activate the ability again to create an additional Power Stone Shard, and you'll have about 2 mana left over, I believe. Oh, so you actually need a little bit more. I didn't realize. I guess I did my math wrong, but you will need probably 21. That way you can create 4 of them, and then you tap each one for 4, which will allow you to use Cogworker Assembler's ability 2 more times, giving you a total of 6, meaning each Power Stone Shard will tap for 6. And after that, it's just infinite because you can keep tapping and creating them, and the amount of mana they tap for each time is going to increase. And these tokens gain haste, so after you get your infinite mana, you can dump it into something like Ball's Evoker or Invoker, or you can create your Fleet Wheel Cruiser, or you can create your Metalwork Colossus, any artifact really. You could create a bunch of copies of different artifact equipments. Anything that's an artifact, you can copy it. You can even just copy Cogwork Assembler himself, and then swing an infinite number of Cogwork Assemblers at your opponents. But that is the combo. That's the way this deck is designed to work. And that's everything. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out a way to make my headset not cut off automatically, but yeah, other than that, if you guys have decks that you request in the future, oh wait, the total cost came out to in Moxfield. It says it's about $25. My friend did order this one, but they did not. So it's the $25 is if you use the moderately played cards. So the lower the quality of the cards, like condition wise, the cheaper it'll be, obviously. But if you use mint condition cards, it's going to be a little more expensive. I think the ones he ordered were near mint for the most part, and that brought it up to 50 with shipping as well. So it's about 25 if you don't take into account shipping, or if you get the lower condition cards. But that's basically it. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, if you want me to do a specific commander and design one, let me know, and I'll see what I can do. And other than that, have a good day.